Well, good morning. Welcome back to the shop. This is our next restoration project of a piece of Delta Rockwell machinery. This is a 1956 vintage Delta Rockwell thickness planer. It's a model 22101 that I picked up recently. It looks to be in pretty rough shape, and I think it's just because it hasn't been used for a long time. Haven't really got into it, so I might find some stuff unexpectedly. But the bed seems to be okay. It does run. It's got a 3-horse single-phase motor that's wired up to 220. I actually turned it on and ran a board through it for a little bit, and it does what it's supposed to do. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to break this down and get it into manageable sections that I can handle it. It's on a dolly here, as you can see, but this dolly is not built correctly, quite frankly. It's very top heavy. This thing weighs just a shade over 700 pounds with the motor and everything. So you have to be really, really careful moving it. So let me give you a little tour. It was missing these plates that go in here, and these are basically just sheet metal, so I'm figuring I can fabricate a pair of these to go on either side, and they bolt in here to the casting with 5/16 machine bolts. As I said, the motor is a 3-horse single phase, currently wired for 220. Not sure if you'd ever want to run this on 110, but I guess you probably could. And you can see down here, it's pretty well rusted up. You can kind of also get an idea of this, the dolly that's on this thing. And I think when I get this ready to go and put it all back together, I'm gonna build a new dolly that's probably this wide, but also comes out here a little bit further to give it a little more front-back rigidity and extend the footprint a little bit. But that's a ways down the pike. What we're going to do first is we're going to start taking this apart from the top down. You'll see on these old machines like this, they have some very big, these aren't hex bolts, they're what's called Philister head screws, at least these are, and then these are machine bolts here. And I picked up a tool on Amazon. This is a proto screwdriver bit that it's got a 1/2-inch drive, and it fits. I've actually got a couple of them. This one happens to be 7/16, and it fits right into these screws here, just nice and tight. I've got the illustrated parts list here that I'm going to try to keep track of things very closely and keep them bagged up so I know how this thing goes back together. Let's start. I'm going to get going here. Basically got the chip breaker off of here and whatnot, but as I got going, I noticed some minor parts, basically just some bolts, nuts, washers that weren't where they're supposed to be when I compared it to the exploded parts diagram. So what I decided to do is keep a record of those things that are missing as I take them off, so that I know when it comes time to put this back together, I've got that. Now, a little tip that I picked up from there's a really good, it's about 70 pages on, I think, vintagemachinery.org, where this guy had taken one of these apart, did a great tutorial of his process, in particular of putting it back together and restoring one of these. So that was one of his tips. Keep track of all your parts on these things, and probably, I don't know if he put them in bags, but I'm going to try to put them in bags according to where they go here. But that way we'll know what we've got and what we don't have. So when it comes time to put it together, we can supplement and bring in new parts where we need to. Okay, we've made a little bit of progress. We got all the kind of the top hardware off here. Got the cutter head out, and now we're going to start taking the gears apart here. I figured out why it was leaking oil so bad. The gasket around here was kind of toast, and plus I don't think the bolts were tight. They just came out way too easily. So I think that's definitely the problem here, and this has got to be that way for a while because there's actually sawdust in the gearbox. So I think this was, the gasket up here was probably messed up for a long time, and so we'll clean all that out. We're going to go ahead and try to get all this top end done. I'll probably take the electrical off and then get the bed out, and then I'll have it to a place where I can, and I'll probably take the motor out. So then I'll have it to a place where I can actually manhandle this stuff around, because right now it's just still. So now that we've got all the gear train out, I'm going to go ahead and take the electricals out so that I can then be ready to split this apart, get the feed rollers out and the table off. There we go. Okay, we're just about ready to take the table off here. And the way I've got to do that is you've got to splay these apart a little bit here to pull these feed rollers out. And then there's a couple of crossbars that are in here that the chip breaker ride on. And they're attached this way with some fairly good sized Allen head bolts in here. So we've got those loosened up. We're going to pull those out. Now, I've got a couple sawhorses here with a 2x4 because this table is really heavy and I don't want to drop it. It's still attached to the raising mechanism, so it's not going to drop down. I just don't want to risk anything happening with that, so I've got a 2x4 here to kind of help stabilize a little bit, because when we pull these apart, that table is just going to be sitting there basically just on the raising mechanism, and it's not very big. It's only about that big and I've already loosened up all the gibs over here, so this table raises and lowers very easily. So when these things pop apart, this table is basically going to be just sitting there with on the raising mechanism. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Up, there's some 5/8 bolts that come up from underneath that attach these columns to the base here, and I've loosened those up. Okay, now this side should be loose, so I'm going to try to tip it out here a little bit, catch these rollers so I can get that out. This is the feed roller. We've got that one out. And then I should be able to take this off. And these things are heavy. I'm going to lay it down like that. I'm going to lay that down so it doesn't bust or fall over. And then we'll do this side. And what you just heard hit the ground there was one of the gibs, one of the wear plates on these gibs. Now, I've also, before we got started here, I loosened up the bed bolts, so I should be able to do those by hand, I think. Maybe not. There's one. These are basically held to the raising mechanism by 4 3/8 by inch or so, inch and a half bolts. Okay, on to the next step here. Next, we're going to take the raising mechanism off, at least off the top here, and then this whole section right here will come off. And then we've got the worm gears and whatnot underneath here, the pinions that convert from the handle to here. We'll take all that out, and then this whole piece of casting here lifts up. Again, these castings are heavy. There. That'll work for the time being until I get this disassembled. Okay. Alright, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take the motor off, and it's heavier than hell, and I've got this little dolly. I'm just going to loosen the bolts, and I think I can just slide it right onto this thing. Then I can kind of put it away here. So let's get started on that. There. So I can move that motor around now. And I think that does it for us. Now we've got to get all this stuff cleaned up. We've got everything disconnected, except I got to take that apart, and I'll take the idlers out of the bottom rollers off the table here, and then I'm going to kind of categorize stuff by area or something like that, so I can just kind of, for example, these things, clean those up, get that ready to go, etc., and just kind of capture and make sure we've got all of our parts. I know there's going to be a couple parts that I'm going to have to locate somewhere, and I don't think it should be too tough because they're not necessarily just basically nuts and bolts and things of that nature, so I think we'll be good. I've got this section up on the bench, and I was getting ready to take this worm gear out, and these things are susceptible to a lot of wear, and it's one of the parts that's kind of hard to find. There's a company down in North Carolina, I think I can get one. And but this one was worn a little bit. I knew that. The fellow I bought it from actually showed me a picture of it, and you can kind of see it there. Now, when I got it up here, I think I know probably part of the reason. There's a snap ring that goes right here, and there's also a bearing, this bearing right here. That bearing is shot, and the snap ring was not down in the recess. It was about half out. It wasn't in the recess at all, and it was just still around the shaft, but not holding that bearing down there. So those things together, I'll bet, contributed heavily to the excessive wear on this worm gear. So now we're going to go ahead and take it out. We've got things, we're going to take that apart next once we try to get it up on the bench, and then the table, and then we'll be in a state where we can just start cleaning up as time allows.